Hello, in this video I will show you what parts to pick, what parts to choose from when building a computer specifically for programming, and that is mainly programming with Visual Studio. I'm not talking about graphics programming, that may be a bit different, also basic web programming with HTML and CSS on, say, Visual Studio Code that may require a lot fewer resources, so a lot cheaper computer might work just as well. But Visual Studio is quite a heavy tool, especially once you get into several instances of Visual Studio, say when you launch your web application, your Windows desktop application, and a couple of APIs at the same time. You will need quite a few resources on that computer. So we'll be looking at some good parts. Now, the point here is not the beauty. It's not the sort of highest performance, but it's also not the budget. The main point here is the quietness of it. We don't want our environment to be very loud, right? Especially when you work in your room somewhere alone, perhaps in your office, again, with no background noise and sound. If you're playing a video somewhere, that might be a bit different. But if you have nothing on, you will hear your computer, and at the very least you want to make that sound somewhat pleasant. So I will show you some sort of cooling tips on how to make it as quiet as possible, and then the parts that make sense in terms of a budget and in terms of a performance that you actually need to work with Visual Studio properly. So first of all, the processor. What do we have here? We have i5, Intel Core i5, 1100, 400, right? 11, 400, however you want to say it. So this is 11th generation. If you are familiar with this stuff, we have the 12 now, but I don't really like the 12, especially at this sort of middle range, I guess you would say. The reason mainly is compatibility with coolers, and another thing is, as you may know, we have DDR5 memory now, which is compatible with the 12th generation, but that is extremely difficult to get. In fact, in my local stores, when I looked at it, it's almost impossible to get a motherboard for that, and those slots, RAM slots as well, so sticks rather. It is very difficult to get. Also, the cooling is somewhat compatible in some cases, but then it's not, and you need additional parts and all those things, and it's just a real pain. Also, it will be a bit more expensive, so what's the point? If you're not gonna get DDR5, you're getting pretty much the same thing for even a bit of a lower price. Now, again, this is not a compromise. This is a very good processor. What we have here is 6 cores, which is quite enough for Visual Studio development. Now, you do want at least 6. Anything less, I have a laptop with 4 cores. It is a very powerful laptop, but it does start to struggle a bit when you have several instances opened and running a few things at the same time. It's perfectly fine, but it's reaching that limit. So on a desktop, i5, 11400, perfect. We don't need anything else. What we do need, however, is the integrated graphics, which this does indeed provide. We will not have a GPU. There is absolutely no point in wasting money on that. You're not here to play games, you're here to do work. And of course, if you later want to perhaps resell that computer as a gaming computer, you can easily add the GPU later. If you want to play some games, you can add that later. But that's not the point here. We're going for programming, not playing games or doing some other stuff. And this is perfectly fine. We have the integrated graphics. Everything can run at 4K and all that stuff if you need it. We have support, of course, for DDR4 and all that stuff. Another thing is we have support for PCIe Gen 4. That will be for the storage. I'll show you some options for the storage. You really want fast storage for programming that is quite useful. Now, this is one of the options. This stuff goes for under $200 these days, even 200 euros in my region. So what I saw was 190 euros, and I even saw this for $169, I believe, somewhere on Amazon or somewhere like that. So these are quite cheap now, these processors, and they are quite powerful. They are indeed quite powerful. Now, if you are going to go into Xamarin territory, you may consider going a bit further, and that would be the i7, okay, i7. And if you go with i7, go with the highest i7. That's 11700K. All that unlocked stuff overclockable, and it does include the integrated graphics as well. Now, this will double the price. It will pretty much double the price. There's no denying that. So, again, if you really want to push it further, and especially if you're doing a lot of that sort of Xamarin development, you're connecting to, say, you're launching Xamarin, and then at the same time you have to be connected to several servers via remote desktop. Now, that may warrant the purchase of this particular processor, but I believe for the temperatures as well, so that everything is more quiet, this i5 option is perfectly fine. So the next thing what we'll want to look at is the cooling, right? We want the cooling. Now, the cooling, my recommendation would be this. This is a water cooling. Now, I know people say water cooling is perhaps more difficult to install for whatever reason. Now, I don't believe that to be the case. You just sort of screw a few screws in and that's it. It's attachable, and sometimes it's, I believe this particular device does have thermal paste pre-applied, so it's quite easy. There's basically nothing to do, just screw a few things in and you're good to go. Now, the reason we are going with a liquid cooler is basically the noise. Now, there are quiet ones in terms of the air coolers, but they can't really go to that 0 RPM, which this pretty much can do. So on those idle moments, you will want to do that, and the same will go for the power supply as well. Something interesting I'll show you with that. Now, this is quite cheap. This is $120 on their site. You can probably find different prices where you're actually going to purchase it, but say around $120, that will be the price for this cooler, and believe me, it will be worth it. The temperatures will be great, and the noise levels will be amazing. I have a similar one. I have a more expensive one. Now, it's probably twice as expensive because it's white. But again, we're not going for beauty here. We're going for black, simple stuff. But one of the main selling points of this arrangement are these fans. These are the maglev bearing fans. So basically, they have no noise on their own. They are not making any sort of grinding or whatever noise from that friction. There's no noise like that. You will hear the air noise, but I believe air noise is something that doesn't really give you a headache. The grinding and the sort of friction noise, that can be extremely annoying on these cheaper fans and more simple fans. So this is a great option. If you are going to add other kinds of fans, do look for those maglev bearings. Believe me, I have them here. They are amazing. They work quite well, and again, the noise levels are just great. And again, this is a budget option, and there is another option that Corsair sells, and they have pretty much the same arrangement, but I believe the fans are not maglev fans, and it's a bit cheaper, so do be careful if you are going to buy this, so not to buy the other one. I believe this one is H100i, maybe the other one is X or something like that, and that's probably going to be a bit louder. So this is what we have for the basic sort of arrangement for the processor and for the cooling. This will be extremely quiet. This is what we want. Now, for the case, again, we're not going after the beauty, right? So basic stuff, something like this, will go for like $30-40. Again, it depends on where you live. Cases are a bit weird these days. It can go for a lot more if you have to ship it. Personally, I don't ship any of my computer parts. I just go and pick them up. So I don't deal with shipping costs when you buy from retail. I don't know much about that, but that obviously can increase the cost on other parts as well. But something basic like this, you just throw away those useless fans, put in the radiator, and you're good to go. And this is like 30 or something dollars. Now, if you are going to go more expensive, you should probably give yourself a budget of 120, and then you'll have no compromises. Again, you have to be quite careful. And also, again, case fans, we are going for very quiet, so you probably have to throw them away, and if you want extra ones, you'll have to buy those maglev ones from Corsair. They go for around, I saw, $20, €20 each. The cheaper ones with no license, stuff like that, the more expensive ones can be 30, 40 or something like that. So be careful about that. But with that IO, you don't really need additional fans. That will cool it enough, unless you want to push some air through the case. Just add an additional one. Say, for example, here, throw this away, put the radiator in front, and then just put another little fan in the back, just so the air flows through the case and gives that sort of extra cooling to the motherboard and other components. Now, speaking of motherboard, we can take a look at this one. This is MSI. MSI boards are quite good. I've been using them for many, many years. This one is B560M. So we want to go for M, that's a bit smaller. The micro ATX we want to go for. It's going to be smaller. We don't have too many parts. We don't have graphics cards, so we don't need something very large. We do need a relatively large case. Do be careful about that. Small cases can be hard. It will be difficult to fit the parts in. Can be quite annoying, so go for a bigger case and smaller motherboard. It won't look very good because the motherboard might actually look very sort of tiny inside the case, but again, we're not going about the looks here. We are looking after the noise levels, so we want a quiet environment and relatively high performance. So this is quite good. It supports the 11th gen, of course. It has 2 slots for the RAM, and it has Gen 4 PCIe for the storage. That's what I will recommend you get, because it is quite fast. And Gen 3 is sort of cheaper, but I would prefer to match. The 11th gen is sort of 4th gen of the PCIe. Now, of course, it will work with PCIe Gen 3, but I prefer to match those versions. It sort of gives me a feel of better stability. Probably doesn't matter, but why not just go with that? It doesn't really cost that much more. So this is what we have. Another thing that we can look at here, we have the internet connection. That is, I believe, 2.5, if I'm not mistaken, so that is quite important. And we're gonna have all the other stuff. One HDMI, that is what we need. That's what we are going to be using, and that's it. And this goes for around $100, so that's the important part. You go any higher than that, you might as well go to the sort of highest in terms of reasonable, which will be, say, around $200, perhaps a bit more. Now, you will see motherboards that cost $500-600. That's just nonsense. You don't need that. Nobody does. So don't even look at that. And don't go for something too cheap. They might be a bit troublesome. They might actually have this noise from themselves. So do be sort of careful with that. Also, we have quite a high-end processor as well. Not the high-end per se, but you might as well get a bit of a better motherboard. So this is what we have. It has all the supports for the CPU. Again, it probably doesn't look all that great, but we're not gonna go for looks here. Other than that, it should function extremely well. We have 2 slots for RAMs, and now we get into the RAMs. So this is on Amazon. You can get these everywhere. I would say don't order RAM with shipping. I had some problems even without shipping. Some of them do get sort of damaged, so just pick it up at the store. See that the box isn't damaged. The price will be around the same. What you're looking to spend with no lights and other nonsense, you're looking to spend at around $120 for a 2-part kit. So you have 2 sticks, that's your kit, and we are going with 2x16. Okay, so that's a total of 32. Now you may think 32 is an overkill, but personally I have more than 16 and it's always at more than 16. Now I do have a lot of Visual Studio opened, I do have many tabs opened in my browsers, and yes, I have several browsers opened usually, so it does eat up all that RAM, and it is very useful to have 32 rather than 16. Again, I have a laptop which has 16, and sometimes it becomes a bit of a bottleneck. Now, besides the size, what you have to look is the speed. Now, we won't really see the speed too clearly here, but basically what we are looking at is 3200. Okay, memory speed 3200, and then we have something called latency. If you're not familiar with that, doesn't matter. Basically, what you're looking for is C16. It might be CL16, but 3200 and CL or C16. That's what you're looking for. This will be sort of, in my opinion at least, at the moment, the best value for money ratio that you can get. It's fast enough, and even if you want to resell this computer as a gaming computer, just throw in a graphics card and it will play pretty much any game that you want. So that is a good option. And again, don't go for colors. Just see that the brand is somewhat reputable. Like this one, for example, we have 4.8 out of 5 stars in terms of reviews. So the only negative ones, I presume, will just be some shipping damage or something like that. So this is a really good choice. I haven't used this, so I'm not going to recommend it. But again, go by reviews and you'll find what you need. Another thing that we have to look at is storage. Storage, I personally believe, for programming isn't really that important in terms of size. But what you can get these days for size is quite incredible. Now, this right here is Gen 4 PCIe M.2 SSD. That's what you want to go. PCIe, NVMe, that thing. This little slot, it goes into the motherboard, it goes right here, there's this little thing, you unscrew that, it's a heatsink, put that in, screw that in, it's got a heatsink. So you, since we have that motherboard with a heatsink provided, we can go for a cheaper option on the SSD without heatsink because we already have one. So we go for this. These got great read and write speeds, and again, those are very useful when you're moving files, especially if you get another one. So I believe the motherboard that I recommended supports another Gen 3. The speeds are pretty much the same, so you can put in a Gen 3, and then if you want to copy huge files from one folder in one drive to the other folder in another drive, it will be extremely fast. It will be done in seconds, and if you've been using hard drives for a long time, HDD hard drives, it will be quite amazing the speed that this stuff can deliver. It ensures that smooth performance no matter what you do. So you really have to go for this. And again, it's only $100. You get 1 terabyte for $100. Extremely fast storage. And again, for Visual Studio development, you probably would be fine with 500 or even 250. Now, 250 I wouldn't recommend. That's tricky, especially if we look at these prices. Like right here, we see we have 500 for $59.99, and then we have 250 for $49.99. So why wouldn't you spend extra $10 to get double the capacity, right? Just do it, and why not? Okay, so we have all this set and done. we have the storage, we have the RAM, we have the processor, we have the motherboard, and the final thing will be the power supply. The power supply, I'm not necessarily recommending this particular one, right? I'm not necessarily recommending it, but this is quite a good option. It's only 550 watts, I believe, plenty enough. If you want that sort of upgradability in the future, if you really think you might add a graphics card and play games or resell it as gaming computer, you might just buy a more expensive one and a more powerful one. So then I would say go for like 850. It probably doesn't cost that much. It's double the price, of course, it's double the price, but it's $140 compared to $75, and they go for pretty much that amount in retail stores as well, as far as I can see. But going back to the general look at the power supplies, what you're looking for is this: 0 RPM fan mode. Basically, when your computer is at sort of an idle or just not really requiring too much power, which in these cases it would be pretty much all the time, especially if you buy one of the, let's say, 800 watt, that will probably be always at low power. So this is very useful. It definitely reduces those noise levels. Now, one thing I would be excited if this had is those maglev bearings. I don't think it has that. Maybe the more expensive ones do. I just don't see that in the description, so they probably don't have that. But again, you really want the 0 RPM fan mode. Another option is some of the power supplies have a button for that, so it's called a hybrid mode or something like that, and if you push that button it will invoke that 0 RPM mode. If you don't push the button, it will just run all the time. But this is a great way to reduce that noise. So these two things are the most important for noise, I believe. This power supply with 0 RPM, and then a good liquid cooler with maglev bearings, because this will pretty much run at low RPM all the time. And if you have a decent case, at least semi-decent case, it will be great. Now, another thing about case and temperatures, you see this doesn't have any cover in the front, so you don't want any covers. You want that air to sort of just flow through the radiator, and you'll be happy, everything will be cool and extremely quiet as well. So just to recap, for the processor, we are going with i5 11400. Basic i5 processor. It's not the lowest kind, but it does have integrated graphics, which is what we definitely want. Even if you go with some other option, make sure you have integrated graphics, because you don't have a graphics card, and for programming that would be a waste of money. Another thing is make sure to have at least 32 gigs of RAM. That is quite important. And then the motherboard, go at around 100, go with B560, go with micro. It will also be cheaper and you don't need all that extra stuff, but again, B550, go with that. There are H and other sort of lower end ones. It might be a bit too low end, so you're sort of risking at that point. And then for storage, we are going with an NVMe SSD. Those are very fast, and believe me, if you've never used these before, they will be worth your money. So this is quite useful. Now, again, some of these parts may cost more, may cost less in different regions. You may also have to deal with shipping issues. Personally, again, I like to just go and pick them up at the store. I order them and pick them up. That's the best way to do it. That way you can expect the boxes. See if they aren't broken, damaged, and other things like that. You just pick them up, drive them home, and collect your computer. So with that said, I hope this was helpful, and we will conclude this video.